Before we get into it, a quick note for anyone building tools in the Magic space. MTG Sold collects a pretty large amount of sales and supply data, and I make that data set available for free to people who actually want to build something with it. That includes sales volume, supply data, and the underlying historical data I use for a lot of the analysis on the show. I don't really advertise it. The documentation is just sitting there at mtgsold.com/docs, and that's intentional. If you make it that far, read through it, and have an idea and want to access the data, shoot me an email at contact@mtgsold.com. There's no API subscription I'm trying to sell you. If you're building something useful and the MTG Sold data can help, I'm generally happy to provide it. That's mtgsold.com/docs, DOCS. You're listening to the MTG Sold podcast. This is the week of August 17th to August 23rd, 2026. Welcome back. Thanks for listening. Let's jump right into it. Revenue dropped 30% from the Hobbit release spike, about $958,000 across 6,000 units on TCG Player, down from about $1.4 million last week. That's the pullback you'd expect after the biggest release week of the year. What you might not expect is that what happened inside those numbers. Quick note for anyone new, when I say supply in this segment, I mean the average number of listed units on TCG Player on any given day, not total printed or distributed product. The Hobbit Collector Booster Display gained about 3% in the second week of open market trading. Supply grew 28%, sellers grew 62%, and the price went up anyway. Sell-through was 2.5 times the shelf. Last week, I asked whether the $853 pre-release price was real demand or scarcity pricing. The open market has now answered twice. The demand is real. Scarcity may be still helping the price, but it can't explain away a 28% supply increase, 62% more sellers, and the box still moving higher. When listed inventory grows 28% across 68 sellers, and buying still pushes the price higher, that usually means the collector base is deeper than the pre-release hype suggested. Crack the plates, reversed. 3 weeks of double-digit declines, and last week I said the box was $7 from MSRP and predicted sellers would leave when margin disappeared. That's what happened. Supply cratered 59%, sellers dropped 12%, and the price bounced about 9%, still clearing twice its shelf. The demand was there the whole time, the sellers were the variable. When you compress margin that close to MSRP on a scene box, one of two things happens. Either sellers pull their listings entirely because the math doesn't work, or someone swoops in to buy the dip. This week, it was the first one. Sellers left, supply collapsed, and the remaining inventory repriced upwards. Treasures of Smog, the other scene box, didn't follow. Its sellers grew 48%, while supply barely moved, and the decline continued at about 8%. One box hit its floor and bounced. The other one hasn't found one. My read is that the Treasure of Smog has more room to fall because its price started higher and there's no obvious MSRP anchor for sellers to crowd around. The Play Booster display held flat at $188 while the seller pool doubled and supply pushed from 317 to 480 average quantity. 760 units sold will sell through around 1.5 times the shelf. The market absorbed a substantial release week supply increase without the price breaking, but some distributors are still waiting on delayed Play Booster inventory with full fulfillment expected by early September. So the real test comes when that product lands. If that box holds through, then I'd call the release genuinely healthy. Now, reality fracture. The Collector Booster Display pre-order drain accelerated hard this week. Supply fell 49%, sellers dropped 35%, sell-through nearly twice the shelf. The Play Booster jumped 12% to about $143. MagicCon Amsterdam spoilers dropped 28 cards, including the Bloodline Recollector, 500 serialized copies worldwide. Spoiler season starts September 8th, and there are 5 weeks left before the October 2nd release. At this pace, if you haven't locked in a pre-order, you're watching the book thin out in real time before the first spoiler even drops. Last week I mentioned the Strixhaven Collector Booster Pack thinning on its own. This week, the tightening spread to 3 more products. The Codex bundle climbed nearly 14% on TCG Player. Silverquill Influence Commander doubled its units to 63, while listed inventory dropped 35%. The Commander deck case went from 22 units to 96, while listed inventory fell 31%. Strixhaven was the most recent in-universe set. The reprint pipeline is winding down until end of year, and Reality Fracture picks up the storyline directly with Hexhaven, a dark mirror of the Strixhaven colleges. That combination of shrinking supply and a successor set pulling interest forward is unusual. What that probably means is a mix of speculation and organic commander demand converging on the same inventory at the same time. Either way, the sealed supply is tightening and you're holding Strixhaven sealed. 3 products compressing simultaneously isn't noise. Edge of Eternity's commander set of 2 finally moved. 5 weeks flat at roughly $75 while supply drained steadily. This week up about 9% to $82 as supply fell another 33%. The product appears to be reaching the end of active distribution. 6 weeks of someone patiently buying this without chasing the ask, and the price finally responded. That's usually a sign that the remaining supply is thin enough for small demand shifts to move the needle. The Lost Caverns of Ixalan commander deck, Explorers of the Deep, keeps draining too. Supply down 44%, sellers down 33%. Sell through above 1 times the shelf. No catalyst I can find, just a product steadily absorbed without anyone talking about it. If I had to guess, it's either a singles arbitrage play where the deck contents are worth more than the box, or casual commander players are discovering this deck late. Either way, the shelf is hollowing out. Star Trek Collector Booster Display pre-order supply thinned another 30%. Price flat at about $699. Sell through around half the shelf. November 13 release. 11 weeks out. Last week I said Star Trek flattened. This week, the Collector Booster resumed its drain while the Play Booster stayed flat.
A quick word from today's sponsor, me. I built mtgdeck.build, a free machine learning deck builder that creates format legal decks using only the cards you already own. It's useful for newer players trying to build their first decks, long-term players looking to do something with their bulk, and sellers putting together playable budget decks. It supports Commander, Pauper, Legacy, Brawl, and several other formats. Upload your collection, choose a format, and let it build from what you have. No additional cards required. You can try it for free at mtgdeck.build. Again, mtgdeck.build.
The Marvel Collector Booster Display story changed shape this week. Last week I called it on the clock. This week supply barely moved, down 2% versus 44% last week. The price pulled back slightly to about $469. Either the acute selling pressure exhausted itself and the supply stabilized, or buyers paused and sellers are waiting to see who blinks first. The finite pull story still holds, but the sprint slowed to a walk. On the decliner side, the Marvel Beginner Box leads at down about 16%, accelerating from last week. Volume grew from 38 to 62 units while the price dropped. Sellers are competing each other down on a shelf that barely moved. Volume grew, so buyers are still showing up. The Hobbit bundle and gift bundle kept normalizing. More sellers pushing prices lower. The gift bundle September 4th release is 11 days away, with supply already doubling. If you're watching Hobbit, the premium tier answered. 2 weeks of open market data with a growing seller pool, and the collector booster display price is higher than where it settled after the pre-release. If you're watching Strixhaven, the next 2 weeks will tell you whether this is a structural tightening or a blip. Watch supply on the Commander Precons and the Codex bundle. And if you've been watching Reality Fracture pre-orders, half the listed TCG player inventory disappeared this week through some combination of sales and sellers pulling listings. That's it. That's the week. Full numbers and article on the website at mtgsold.com. See you next Monday.